This is episode number 21 of the Expert Table Tennis Podcast. My name is Ben Larcombe, and joining me on the show today is English table tennis coach Marc Burman. Now, Marc was my first ever table tennis coach. I started playing table tennis at the age of about 9 down at the local leisure centre, and Marc was the coach there. So I thought it would be brilliant to get him on the show, talk a little bit about what he can remember about me as a kid and the club that he built out of that leisure centre. And then I also wanted to talk a bit more about just generally some of the lessons that Marc has learnt from his almost 25 years worth of experience coaching. He's got a lot of experience coaching players from beginners all the way up to England standard junior players. He worked very extensively with Emma Torkington, who was a top England junior a few years ago. So Marc's got loads of advice to share, and we get into all sorts of different issues that I think are really going to help you out with your development as a player. I hope you enjoy this one. It was a lot of fun talking to Marc, so I'm sure you will. Let's get into the interview with Marc Burman. Joining me on the show today is Marc Burman. Hi, Marc.
Hi, Ben.
It's nice to have you on. It's been a while since I've spoken to you, but I mean, as I said in the little intro, you were my first ever coach when I started when I was about 8 or 9. So yeah. It's going to be interesting having a chat and having a little trip down memory lane with you.
Makes me feel really old.
Yeah. How old are you now, Marc?
I'm 39.
And I mean, I think it was 1999 when I first went along to your club. So that's kind of 16 years ago. So you would have been about 23.
Yeah, I believe so. I was 23, I think. Yeah.
Something like that. And the club was Westcroft, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah, Westcroft Leisure Centre.
So can you tell us a bit about kind of what that club was like? It was based in a leisure centre instead of being in kind of like a separate building. But how did the club start and kind of what was Westcroft like?
Well, it's interesting how Westcroft started because it's kind of started by accident. I was 15, about to turn 16, and I was fanatical about Chelsea Football Club. Absolutely fanatical. This was the days before the internet. And right. I used to go on teletext after they'd play and look at the league tables and look at who we played next. And I'd write down all the scores and all the permutations of what would happen if we won and how many goals we'd need to win by. Absolutely fanatical about them. And at the bottom of the screen, there was a number you could call. You could call Chelsea Football Club and listen to the latest news and who we might be signing and things like that. And one summer holidays, both my parents were at work. I was a bit bored and I thought I want to find the latest news out about Chelsea Football Club. So I rang this number and you get 5 minutes of news about who, as I say, developments within the club and who we were going to buy. And sometimes it would change in the afternoon. So I'd call again in the afternoon and listen to it for another 5 minutes. And this went on for about 6 weeks.
This is one of those premium line numbers that charges you a fortune.
At the time, I didn't know. I thought it was free. It was about £1 a minute. And so you can imagine the reaction of my parents when they finally got the bill. They went absolutely ballistic. And I was grounded immediately. And I was told I had to pay it back from immediate effect. So the problem was I didn't actually have a job. So they said, will you go out and get one? So I basically then went out to look for a job and I applied to McDonald's and Burger King and things like that. And the problem was I was a little bit too young. I still wasn't quite 16. So no one would actually give me a job. And a friend of the family had a contact with the manager at Westcroft and said, why don't I arrange a meeting with you and the manager and see if he's got something for you, like a leisure assistant or a lifeguard or something like that. So I said, yeah, great, because I love sports and everything else and very passionate about table tennis. So that meeting was arranged, met with the manager. Unfortunately, he didn't have a job for me. But during the conversation, I said I'm passionate about table tennis. And he said, oh, that's interesting, because we used to run a club on a Saturday morning with a guy, I can't remember his name now, but due to lack of numbers, the club folded quite quickly. Would you be interested in resurrecting it? But the problem is we can't pay you any money. We'll just pay you expenses. If you get the numbers above 10, well, then we can pay you. So I said, yeah, definitely. So I went home and said, I've got a job, even though I didn't really. It was just paying expenses. But my dad was actually secretly quite happy because he was a coach himself at table tennis and a player. And I think he thought me running my own table tennis club would actually make me grow up a bit. So he was all right about it, even though I actually wasn't really earning any money.
Yeah, because that's pretty young to start. Like for a club to, like a leisure centre, to let you start something up at 15.
Well, by this time, I was just borderline 16. So I was very close to being 16. So I had, I believe I was like 16 in 2 weeks or something like that when I actually started the club.
Had you been playing table tennis for a while then? I assume, had your dad got you into it?
He had, yeah. My dad got me into it. My dad was a coach himself, and he had invited me down when I was about 11 to come and play at the local club in Mitcham. And I just got the bug straight away. Absolutely loved it. My friends were there from school as well, so that made it really good for me to go. And my dad was great because he actually, at a very beginning level, he made it really fun. We'd played lots of fun games and round the table and table tennis, cricket, and things like this. And very quickly, I got the bug. My dad bought me my first bat, and I was away. And I rapidly improved quite quickly.
Cool. So then you started this club. What year was it that the club started?
I was 16, so I'd imagine it was like 91. I started
Okay, something like 1991. And like, were you a bit daunted? Like, how did you go about getting players, and did you know what to do with them and everything?
Not really. I was just jumping in the deep end, really. And what was really good, Westcroft supported me quite well because they actually put posters up around the centre for the new club, and they put it in the Leisure Centre magazine. And also one really good thing about it was that the club was in the main hall, and to actually use the Leisure Centre, if you wanted to go swimming or do squash or use any of the facilities, you had to go in past the main hall. So it's very visual for anybody coming into the centre, and that alone attracted a load of people to come and join the club because they could see it going on. Was I daunted? I was at the beginning. It feels like a long time ago. I can't quite remember how I felt, but I must imagine I was pretty daunted. But by the same time, that was tempered by the fact that I was massively enthusiastic about it, and really keen to build this up and make it a success.
Yeah, and you managed to get quite a few decent junior players coming out of there, didn't you?
I did, yeah. Well, it's interesting because the first day it started, I remember there was 3 lads that turned up. And each one of those went on to represent Surrey as a junior. They then invited their friends along, and coupled with the advertising that Westcroft was doing, the numbers just swelled really quickly. And within a short space of time, within a couple of years, it went to 60 odd kids that were coming along, and there was like 20 in each session. I had a beginner session, intermediate and advanced. Because I'd grouped it like that, it really helped for progression purposes, and helped create an environment where people could improve and had something to aim for. So if you're in the beginner session, you thought, I really want to get into the intermediate session. And when you're in the intermediate session, you really wanted to get into the advanced session. And often some of the better players that I'd produced in the advanced session would come down and help out with the beginner session. So it kind of feed back, and it kind of just grew into this big monster on its own, really. It took on a life of its own in the end. I had people coming in to help out with coaching who were also coaches as well. It grew massive. I mean, as I say, there was trials which took place every year, and one particular year, this event, by the way, is the trials to decide who's going to be in the Surrey teams.
Yeah,
and in the Surrey trials, 70% of the participants were from Westcroft. And as I say, one year, every single age group, the number one player was from Westcroft too. It had taken on a life of its own. And my fanaticism for Chelsea Football Club completely disappeared. I'd lost all interest in Chelsea, and that fanaticism and passion went into building the club up.
Now that's actually like quite an interesting point that I've thought about a bit, is kind of how some people seem to have this ability to like really channel all their energy into one thing, like a little bit obsessively.
Yeah.
But I feel like I kind of have that, and it sounds like you've got that.
Yeah.
And if you read about a lot of top sports people, it seems that a lot of them have it as well. Like, and it's relatively rare.
Yeah, it is. I think you need it, to be honest. From all the successful people, I mean, as we continue our conversation, I think that comes up quite often in some of the other experiences I've had with top people that I've been involved in coaching. That they've got very single-minded, very focused, and I think you need that to do something, because I think that when you do something because you love it, it becomes a success. If you do it purely for monetary reasons, I'm not quite sure it's going to be the same level of success. And I think that goes hand in hand with success goes hand in hand with the passion.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I pop up on the scene in about 1999 after about the club's been going for 8 years.
Yeah.
I think actually my mum saw a poster in the leisure centre when we were there doing swimming or something. So
yeah,
obviously, the posters are working out. I think I tried football on Saturday mornings, and standing in the cold and the rain didn't really sit very well with me as an 8 or 9 year old.
No.
What can you remember from when I was there? Because I think I was there for probably about 18 months or 2 years.
Yeah, well, it's funny because when we met about a year ago at British League, we were talking a little bit, and it made me feel really old. But I'm not that old in coaching terms. I'm only 39. It's relatively young. I'll emphasise that. But it made me also look back and think, blimey, I've been coaching 25 years. Well, nearly 25 years. And when you came along, my memories of you were, I remember you coming along with your dad, and your dad sort of being very supportive of you. I remember your mum coming along from time to time, but your dad sticks in my mind as somebody. He actually helped out with the sessions as well. Like
did he?
Yeah, he helped out, and I always remember him being really supportive of yourself. And what I remember about you is, what stood out for me with you is that you were, as a 10-year-old, you were very diligent, and I could set you an exercise, and you do it with as much effort as you could muster, and then 5-10 minutes later I'd come back and you were still doing it with the same intensity without anybody prompting you. And for a 10-year-old, that stood out from everybody else, because most 10-year-olds don't have a very good attention span, but you seem to be very, very focused and didn't need any motivation from anybody, and as a result of that, you started to get good quite quickly.
And what kind of things did you have me doing? What were the drills that you do in the sessions?
Well, a lot of it, I mean, Westcroft really was about trying to get people into the game. So I made a lot of it very fun. What my emphasis was trying to do exercises that were fun, as well as you were also learning a skill. If I could do that, then I felt with beginners, and especially junior beginners, they loved it, and their rate of learning was accelerated because they were having fun. So we do lots of things like, we do the basic, we go through the basic strokes and do basic exercises, but we did a lot of top table, round the table, table tennis, cricket, table tennis, basketball, do lots of things like that, where, as I say, there was a lot of fun games involved to try to encourage everybody to have fun. And I always felt that if the juniors at the beginning level left the session with a big smile on their face, I'd succeeded, because I knew that they were enjoying it. And so really, it wasn't particularly, I didn't do particularly sophisticated drills with the beginner and intermediate players, because for me, it was more about making it really enjoyable.
Yeah, well, it clearly worked, because I got the bug straight away and was properly into it. I remember one thing that I really liked was, when you've got more kids than you've got tables, and you end up you pick people to be controllers.
Yes.
And you kind of go on and you have to hit so many shots with them, and then you go off. And it's brilliant, because when you're at that age, the kids actually really want to be the controllers, even though it means that they're going to be playing with kind of the weaker kids. And I remember you'd go on and you'd be like, oh, I've got so-and-so, he's a good controller. And then you'd be like, after the months were going by, you'd be thinking, oh, maybe I'll get to be a controller one day.
No, exactly. No, that system worked really well. And funny enough, because I know you went on to Mike Panton, didn't you? Crusaders.
Yeah, I think you sent me there after kind of when I got to secondary school age.
Yeah, I did. I recommended a number of players to go there, and particularly at that time when you came on the scene, I was kind of winding down some of my coaching commitments and thinking about going to university. So the really keen ones, I was directing them onto Mike. But just going back onto the point about the system that we used, where we had controllers, I learned that from Mike Panton, because in terms of coaching large numbers, Mike Panton's the best coach I've ever seen. I'd go along to his sessions at Crusaders, and he'd have like 4 tables and 40 children. And I was amazed that every single one of those children got something out of the session. And yet there was only 4 tables there. And he used a system where he had 4 adult feeders, and they would just line up on a bench, and they would rotate round. There'd be 4 on at a time for 50 shots. And as soon as they'd done 50 shots, they come off, sit back on the bench, and the next 4 come on, and it rotated around like that. And I thought, that's fantastic. And I applied that at Westcroft, and it worked.
Yeah, and I've applied that in schools and all sorts of places, because that's just like, that's something that like they should be teaching that on coaching courses, because that's like the best system I've ever seen.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. And the thing is, what happens with that system, these kids start getting good because they're getting good feeding. And very shortly they can become feeders themselves as well. And that's what happens. And so it gathers its own momentum.
Sometimes at school sessions, I'd actually have enough tables for the kids, but I'd deliberately put some away and force them, only put out half the tables so that I had to do that, just because I found that it was actually better.
It's an interesting point you make, because it's also something I discovered over the years, that in sessions where I'd have, there'd be more tables than there were juniors, or there were exactly the right number of tables that there were juniors. I always found that the juniors weren't so motivated, but when there was like less tables than there were juniors, as soon as the table came free, they sprung off the bench, run up to the table, because it was their turn.
They value the time.
They value it more. Yeah, exactly. And they get more out of it.
Yeah. Well, so I'm there every Saturday morning training away for a couple of hours, I think it was. Eventually, I remember you suggesting that I go along to a local Sutton tournament. I remember being a bit sceptical, but I went along. And now it turns out that you were kind of instrumental in creating these little circuit of local tournaments. Do you want to talk to us a bit about those?
Yeah, no, basically, because, through Westcroft, it led to a number of different things happening. Because of the success of the club, I got approached from a lot of other people, from schools and other clubs, to come and coach in there. This was at a point when I decided, could I become a professional or not? And so I decided, do you know what? I want to do something that I love doing and be paid for it. I can't think of anything better. So I pursued that. And a part of that process was, I'd also recognised I was coaching a lot of children at this point, whilst being a professional, and they didn't really have anywhere to go to compete. Local league wasn't really suitable because it was too late for a lot of them, and certainly 1, 2 or 3 star tournaments they weren't ready for. Yet they were playing good, reasonable table tennis, and there needed to be something local that was regular, that was pitched at the right level, to actually get them to cut their teeth competitively. And have a reason to practice. So, if you went to a tournament and did quite well, you'd have a reason to come back to Westcroft or wherever it was and think, do you know what? My backhand wasn't working very well. I lost a match because of my backhand. I'll start working on my backhand a little bit more. So it created a feedback loop. And I think yourself, you played in the London ranking scheme.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I used to get the tube up with my dad somewhere to do those.
That's right. Yeah. And I took a lot of inspiration from that, because that was all about having lots of matches. It wasn't a knockout event, lots and lots of matches. There was also a guy called Steve Willis, who is a teacher stroke player that was at a school called Downside in Purley. And he ran this tournament where basically you banded it according to ability. And I took some inspiration from that, some inspiration from the London rankings, and add my own tweak to it to create the circuit, which basically was eight groups of 4. I seeded everybody because I pretty much knew who everybody was at that time, and you'd have all the winners of their groups would then go out and play in their own event, in the winners event. All the runners up would play in the runners up event. All the third place people would play in the third event, and all the fourths would play in the fourth event. And it gave everybody an opportunity to win some medals. And like yourself, you won the novice event, and then you had something to step up to. You could think, oh, now I want to play in the third place event, and see if I can climb up and get better and win that one. And then if I do that, maybe I can get into the second event, and so on. And it was just a way of climbing up, and it was a fantastic stepping stone for kids to then progress on to either local league or to national tournaments. And the other really great thing is we started doing these once a month in different parts of Surrey, and it was also brilliant because a lot of the coaches of other players that were coaching in Surrey would also come there, and the coaches would meet each other and exchange ideas and chat to each other. And it was a brilliant product in terms of increasing participation, raising standards, but also raising standards of the coaches as well. And so, and that was a tournament that you played in, and it triggered off a lot of people to take the game more seriously.
Yeah, it was definitely brilliant for me because I felt like I'd won something despite losing all my group matches.
Yeah.
Whereas at another tournament, I would have just gone home having lost, and as a 9-year-old, maybe you just think, oh, this isn't for me, and you never play again. So
well, exactly, and look what's happened to you. I mean, I was thinking about it the other day. I mean, if I hadn't have called Chelsea, if I hadn't have called that Chelsea number, we may never have been speaking right now. It's weird how things happen, and I think if you sow seeds of things like the circuit, it creates lots of good things.
Yeah, definitely. Now I know that we've spoken about Customato. You're a big fan of reading and learning about other great coaches, aren't you?
Yes, yeah. I think you can learn a lot from other sports and people in other sports. And there's three people that I've read about quite extensively that I think are absolute giants in the field of sport. I mean, one of them's Customato, and if any of your listeners haven't heard of him, thoroughly recommend doing your research on him. He's amazing. Another one was Bill Shankly at Liverpool.
Yeah,
amazing guy. Vince Lombardi, which was also the coach of the Green Bay Packers. They were extremely successful in the 1960s, 70s. He's amazing as well. And you can read a lot of their quotes online and things they say, interviews with them. And one thing that Bill Shankly, I remember you can see it on YouTube. One of the things Bill Shankly said was that his attitude to things, that when he was in the war, not in the war, when he was in the army during the war, he got given a lot of horrible jobs to do. Often it would be, cleaning out the toilets or washing the dishes or scrubbing the floor. But he said, my attitude was, if you gave me a job to do, if it was scrubbing the floor, I'd want my floor to be cleaner than yours. I'd do every single job that I was given to the absolute best of my ability. He goes, that is one of the key ingredients to being successful at anything, not just sport. And he said that attitude alone is what drove me to build up Liverpool Football Club. It was a major driving force, and I thought that was very interesting because it kind of linked through to what we talked about earlier about elite performers seem to have a different attitude to other people. Muhammad Ali once said that when he went into the training hall, if he'd wake up in the morning feeling really good, bounce out of bed, go into the training hall to train, and he'd give 100%. Another day he might wake up not feeling too great, not really being up for it, a bit tired, a bit fed up, and not really the last thing he wanted to do is go in the training hall. But he'd go into the training hall and give 110% to compensate for the way he felt. Right. He wouldn't allow his feelings or how he felt on any particular day interfere with his mission to become the greatest in the world. And I thought that was quite powerful.
These people are very much guys that are on a mission to become the best in their field. Is that something that you think they've just been born with, or do you think where does that come from? Because so much of becoming a great player is having that real desire to give 110% when you don't want to, and it seems like the majority of people aren't able to do that. But why do you think that is? I
think that it's down to their personality. I think it's down to their upbringing. what they've experienced in life. Sometimes the people that have had the toughest lives seem to, or not the toughest lives, but haven't had the easiest of lives, tend to make the most successful people. And I think you have to actually have experienced some of the hardships in life to actually really appreciate things. And if you've got good parents with you as well who teach you good morals and good ways to live, I think that has an influence. The people around you. That's a whole other subject about how your personality is formed. But I certainly think that there's something in that. But also, creating if you're running a club, if you create an environment where you're fostering these qualities in people, then that's certainly a great thing. Like we talked about with the circuit, that whole idea fosters people to develop,
strive to progress up a chain or something.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think it's difficult to know exactly what makes someone who they are, but I certainly think those are some of the reasons.
So I guess if you decide that you want to become a top table tennis player, and I'm assuming that everyone that is bothering to listen to a table tennis podcast is pretty passionate about becoming good at table tennis.
Yeah.
You need to find ways to develop that mindset where, like you said, even if you're doing some menial task, you want to give it your best. You need to kind of find a way to get that out of yourself somehow.
That's it. Well, I remember, it's interesting in table tennis terms. I remember playing a match for Surrey at senior level. We played Isle of Wight, and Isle of Wight were in the same division as us, but Cole Preem was playing for them. And Cole Preem was, international player. I think at some point he was ranked 30 in the world or something like that. And one of the best players that we've ever produced. And I was lucky enough to get to play against him in this county match. Absolutely blasted me. He beat me 21-3, 21-3, 21-7.
Right.
But you know what was amazing about that experience was that before he played me, he was in the corridor doing his stretches. I wasn't doing any stretches.
Okay.
He was in there doing his stretches, and he came out, and our match was about to start. He pulled out his towel. He placed his towel really nicely underneath the table. He got the ball out and spun it to make sure it was correct. He wiped the table of any kind of debris that might be there. He went through a really methodical routine before we went on and played. And I didn't do any of those things myself. And I was looking at that and thinking, oh, he's just playing me.
Yeah.
He could borrow my bat, play in his jeans and beat me. Why is he doing all this? But I had total respect for him for doing that, because I realised that here's a guy that's not going to leave absolutely anything to chance. And his attitudes, his professional attitudes, which have made him successful, have become a habit. And he does it in whatever situation it is. And when he played me, he played his best. He wasn't giving me anything. And again, I had great respect for him for doing that, because I knew every single point I won, which wasn't many, I actually earned. He wasn't giving me any freebies. And it was, a really good experience. Really nice guy as well, and very approachable. But I was just taken by his whole approach, and it really seemed to signify to me some of the attitudes that you need to be really, really successful at sport.
It's hard to do, isn't it? Because no matter what level we are, we're always going to come up against, where we're playing matches against someone that's a lot weaker than us. It's hard to go into that with that mindset. It's very easy to switch off and have a mess around, but that's something that you've got to foster, isn't it? That professional attitude.
Definitely, that's right. Because I think if you leave things to chance, you just never know. You never know what's going to happen. And I think, as I say, by doing everything that he did, he just wasn't allowing anything to possibly go wrong. He did that against every single opponent he played. So as much as he was doing it for the reasons that I've mentioned in terms of not allowing anything to go wrong, he was also doing it because it was a habit. It was part of his preparation to play. And I just think that's one of the qualities you need to be really good. it's interesting talking about Carl Preem because I also used to play for Ashford Table Tennis Club in Middlesex.
Yeah.
And I remember going down, this is about 10 years ago, and I remember going down there and the guys that run the club, were showing me pictures of previous players. And one of the pictures was including Jean-Michel Save. I went, what? Jean-Michel Save used to play for Ashford? And they said, yeah, he used to play for Ashford in the British League when he was about 19, 20. This was before he really sort of made it big, but he was still very good.
Okay.
And I said to him, well, what was he like? And they said, well, it was really interesting because whenever he trained, any exercise, he would train as though he was in a match. He treated training exactly the same as it was in a match. So any exercise he would do, he would either score points doing that exercise, or he would visualize that the person at the other end of the table was Gatian or Waldner. And he would do the exercise with the same intensity as though he was actually playing someone. And I thought that was fascinating because, again, a lot of people train completely differently to the way they play matches. And then the progression they make in training, they then wonder why it's not happening in a real game.
Because it's two very different things, isn't it?
Yeah, often they train completely differently with a completely different attitude, quite casual and relaxed. But when you're in a match, it's different. And Save obviously clearly was blurring the distinction between the two, and I think that seemed to me to be a very interesting way of training, and that's something I've encouraged my players to do. To think, do it as though you're in a match. Don't just do a basic bog standard serve and third ball attack. You serve like you're doing your best serves that you would do in a real match. And he would also apparently visualize that a lot of the time he was juicing the fifth in a big massive tournament. Okay. If you actually visualize it and play sort of points out with these other players that were also good, and he would do lots of practice visualizing that it was juicing the fifth in the final of a massive tournament. He'd do that loads and loads and loads. So whenever he was actually in that situation for real, he's stacking the odds in his favour. You can't guarantee you're going to win, but certainly it would give him an edge over the other person that hadn't trained that way at all. I thought that was fascinating.
So these are just all little habits that you can start to develop that are going to help you over the long term. Definitely.
And the thing is that attitude is massive. And if you take all these little things and pull them together, it creates one massive thing that makes a massive difference. And, I found that very interesting. I remember I've talked to a few people about the difference between, a lot of people that I coach when they're training, they wonder why what they're doing in training doesn't actually happen in a match. And part of it is to do with the attitude that we just spoke about. But there's another part of it where people get frustrated. They think, well, I can do this backhand in a training with you, but when I go to a match, I can't get anything on. Yeah. Because there's a journey that you need to take. And this is something I've stuck with me through, I've evolved my experiences over time to realize that, for example, if someone has, they have a problem with backhand loop opening up against a push ball, they can't do the shot, they don't know what the technique is. The first thing to do is strip all the exercises down into a very simple exercise where, you give them a push ball and then they practice learning the technique of opening up. They can even do this against a robot, and they start, building the shot and the correct technique into their muscle memory. Yeah. And then they start doing it and they think, oh, great, I've got it. And then they go and play a match and they can't do it. And they go, what's going on? And they often get very frustrated and angry. And what I say to them is, look, when you're doing it in training, you're doing it in a very controlled environment. You know where the ball's going. There's no adrenaline going on here because we're not in a real game. So you need to build up the confidence to be able to do it in a match. And so we need to go through a journey. And the journey is progressing on from this very basic exercise to gradually making the exercise more and more complex until it eventually mimics a completely random situation that would happen in a match. And even then, when they're doing it in training in a random situation, they're still not ready to do it in a match because they need to still build up the confidence. So what I recommend to them, once they're able to do it in training, then they need to find a guinea pig player. They need to go to a training session find an opponent and play a friendly game, ideally against someone that's not as good as them, who's going to give them lots of chances to do this backhand open up. And then they've got to say to themselves, right, whenever the ball's pushed to my backhand, come what may, I'm going to go for it. It doesn't matter if I lose because it's only a friendly, and I'm playing somebody quite weak who's going to give me lots of chances anyway. And I say to them, do that, and then they start doing it, and they miss the first couple, and then they start hitting a few on, and then it works, and then they start winning a point doing it. I can actually win points doing this, and then the confidence starts to build, and then once they've done it against a weaker person, then they need to find someone who's quite good at their level, who's not going to give them so many opportunities, and try it out against that person again in a friendly situation. And it might take weeks or months to get to this point, but when they start doing it against a good player in a practice situation, only then are they actually ready to do it in a real game. And so there needs to be a progression from the training hall up until you're doing it in a real match, and players need to understand that that it's not, when you do it in training, it's not going to happen straight away in a game. And what will also accelerate this process is if you have the attitude of Jean-Michel Save, of treating every single ball as though you were in a game when you're in the training hall or not. For me, that recipe has worked time and time again and proven to be right, because it, as I say, it seems to accelerate the improvement of the players. And when they start doing it in a real game, it gives them massive confidence, and then it's almost integral. It becomes an integral part of their game at that point.
Yeah, there's a something that I've read online. It's like, I think it's by a guy called Wayne Goldsmith. He's got like the 7 steps to skill mastery, and it's like 1 and 2 are like, I can do the skill well. And then he's like, this is where most people stop. And then there's like 3 all the way to 7, which is like, I can do the skill fast and well and good. I can do the skill, everything above, and when I'm under pressure, I can do it when I'm under pressure and all the other stuff, and when I'm tired. And it's like, it shows you like how just because you can do like a backhand open up on a multi-ball feed, like that's ticking off like number 1 of the 7 steps before you can actually do it.
That's it.
Like in a proper game.
That's it. But I think part of the you're totally right, and part of it's just the education of players who are looking to improve. If they understand that it's very unlikely for you to learn the skill in training and immediately execute it in a pressurized match when you're playing in a team, for example. I haven't ever seen it happen. So as I say, it's but players are not quite aware of that, especially if they're inexperienced, can get very frustrated and actually disillusioned. And they must,
because they think that they have some kind of individual problem where they're not able to play how they think they should be able to play in matches, and then you have to kind of remind them that no, actually everyone does this, and the fact that you think that you're going to be able to do these shots in a match is actually ludicrous. It's not that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also, the other element is doing it against different style of players, because they might do it against you in a training hall or against a particular player, but someone else who's left-handed, who puts a bit of side spin on their chop or float chops or whatever, or float pushes, everybody gives you slightly different type of ball, and you need to also embrace different styles and do it against them. So it's certainly not, it's impossible for something to happen overnight.
We're going to have to stop things there. I spoke to Marc for just over an hour, so I've decided to cut this one down the middle, and we will split it into a part 1 and a part 2. Part 2 will be coming next Friday for you, and we'll be continuing to talk about loads more to do with the kind of attitude you need to develop in order to become a top table tennis player. That's something that I find really interesting. I know that Marc has done a lot of reading and research about that, as you can tell from this episode. So I hope you've enjoyed what you've heard so far, and that you'll be tuning in next week. There are 2 things that I want to draw out from what Marc said so far. The first really applies to, I guess, for coaches and anyone that's working with beginners or kids, or just encouraging your own children who are playing table tennis. And that's the importance of finding ways to make it fun and entertaining and not too much pressure for kids that are just starting out. We went through that story of me playing my first tournament, and I mean, I didn't do that well at that tournament. I was put in a group of 4 players. I lost all my matches, so in many tournaments, that would just mean you go home. And as a 9-year-old, that is pretty crushing to feel like you've lost all your matches. The brilliant thing about this tournament that Mark had created, this little circuit tournament, was that even though I came fourth, I still had something to play for. And because I then won all my matches against other people that came fourth, I remember getting a little trophy that was the same size as the trophy of the person who'd won. It just said that I'd won the novice instead of the main event. And I left feeling really pleased and encouraged, like I wanted to keep playing. Whereas if I'd just lost in the group and gone home, who knows what might have happened. So it just shows how important it is to really make the training and the practice fun, which I know Mark did a brilliant job at, and then ease kids into competition. You don't want kids going and getting battered and just feeling useless and demoralized and not wanting to play anymore. You want to give them little boosts, and we don't want to give medals to everyone, but when they're just starting out, it's nice to have something like that, and I know that was really important for me. The second point I want to draw out is for players that are obviously more developed further down the line, and they're competing and they're taking it seriously. And I just want to emphasize that story that Mark told about Carl Preen and his professional attitude. And as I said in the interview, it's really hard to go into matches where you're playing down against weaker people with that professional attitude, not leaving anything to chance, playing your best, making sure that you are going to go and beat them and that you're not giving them any chances to get in there and get confident, and then you start feeling nervous. But it's difficult. It's very easy to rock up, not really bothered, to think you're going to win easily, to not give it your all, to be kind of messing around a bit, and then all of a sudden you find that you've lost the first set and you're in big trouble. I really like that idea of developing the professional mindset, taking every match really seriously and going into it just with that attitude of, I'm going to prove to everyone right now why I'm ranked above you, why people are expecting me to beat you. And I'm definitely going to be trying to use that in my local league matches where, there's a range of opponents that you come up against, and sometimes you are playing people that are a fair level below you. And I'm going to go in trying to use that attitude of, I'm going to show you why I get a 70% average or whatever when they're only on a 20 or 30%. I think that is hopefully going to really help me to stay focused and give my all in matches. So they're the two things that I'd like to draw out from that interview. I hope you're looking forward to part 2. It's got loads more brilliant stuff in there, particularly looking at that attitude that's needed in order to achieve greatness in the sport of table tennis. That's all for this week. I would just ask you, as always, to please subscribe to the show on iTunes if that's what you use to listen to the show. You can leave us a review on there as well. I'd really appreciate that. Please continue sharing the show on Facebook and Twitter. We're doing really well so far with the growth of the show. We are halfway through the month of October, and we're very close to having 3,000 downloads. So it would be brilliant if we could get up to 6,000 downloads by the end of October. That would be absolutely awesome. And I know that if you keep sharing the podcast with your friends and on social media, that's going to happen because the show is just growing and growing. So thank you so much for everyone that's been supporting the show. I'll be back in a week's time with part 2 of my interview with Marc Burman. See you then.